said, I had a really fun conversation yesterday with Aubrey. We were sitting down and spending some time coaching, and ever since I had that conversation with him, I've been very reflective of a couple of things. Many of you in here, several of you in here, how many of you remember Jeff Lighton? Do you remember Jeff Lighton?
Yep.
Yeah, we were talking about Jeff, and it was very, very, very quick. But I want to just reset. I want to state this story, and then I want to jump into this, and this will go right in alignment. John, you remember him, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you guys were very close, right?
He kept hounding me as to when I'm getting married, and I wasn't even dating anymore.
Yeah. He is such a good soul, man. The guy was just radiated so many wonderful characteristics of humanity. And Greg, do you remember him?
Very well.
Yeah. He was very impactful. And you think about it, he was only here. Do you remember him, Ruby? Or no?
I remember talking to him in passing, but I didn't really get to know him.
Yeah, if you remember, he was British.
Yeah, I joined in 2011, and so I think I don't think I focused too much on him, but yeah, I know who he was.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, some of you know the story, and I didn't go. I'll go in just a little bit more detail. Justin, you remember Jeff Lighton?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Now you think about that. Here's a guy who's been gone. He didn't do a lot of business, which is interesting. He was a former executive and account rep for Johnson & Johnson. His biggest contract was Tylenol. He represented Tylenol specifically to Walmart, which was his main focus for all of Johnson & Johnson. Of course, it was millions upon millions of dollars from that standpoint. But as you guys may remember the story, as I was telling Aubrey yesterday, I was sitting in a coaching session just in this conference room right over here. The ones that now have glass on them, but basically those were the ones. And I was sitting there and I said to him, I said, Jeff, you look a little bit yellow. What's the story here, man? Are you okay? And he said, yeah. He goes, I know. He goes, my wife noticed that. And he said, tomorrow or the next day, whatever it was, he said, I'm going to the doctor. And I said, good, let me know how that goes. Well, if some of you may remember the story is that he went and did that. And then within a day or days later, I don't remember the exact time frame, maybe one of you do, but within a day or so later, he was in the hospital and of course having tests, and what ended up happening is that he had pancreatic cancer. And as he went in there on that very first day, he walked in, had a surgery, and myself, John Syatt, and Rob Oakey, that night after his surgery, we came to see him. And as we stood there, as I was telling Aubrey yesterday, I said, I didn't get into this much detail. I said, as I was standing at the foot of his bed, and there he is, as we all know who he was, I always say this, he had bigger paws and hands than me, man. He was a big dude, and just full of love and life and light and goodness, and always had a joke. He was a prolific writer. I don't know if you know that. He wrote a book that was a fictional book, and I can't even remember the details of it other than it was very similar to a Harry Potter type of book. Anyway, I'm standing there and I said, hey, what would you tell these young whippersnappers? And I remember I got him to laugh. I said, what counsel would you give to us? And he said, and some of you certainly have heard this, but just to remind us, kind of sets the tone of what I want to share with you. He said, I would tell you this, I would laugh more, I would learn more, and I would love more. And he's in accordance with that, John, like you said, how to deal oftentimes with pain. Another way to deal with it is to laugh and put laughter into your life. And I remember sitting there and not realizing how profound it was, but Aubrey here and I had sat down, I've been thinking about it literally nonstop. Because within 24 hours later, he passed away, and he died. And I remember, and I'll be very open to this. I've held the hand of a lot of people when they've taken their last breaths. I would think probably a little more than the average. I mean, like 4 or 5 people I've had where I have either been one hand away from them taking their last breaths, or while they've been taking their last breath, I'm holding their hand. And pardon?
Remind me not to call you when I'm on the
I know. Well, it was all part of the, we knew it was happening, Justin, right? But I say that, and so I've been around a lot of death ever since I was younger. Just people who raised me, a lot of them had muscular dystrophy, a lot of them had a lot of challenges, and so from that standpoint, you know, I look back and I think to myself, wow, here's a guy who really looked at life from that perspective. And anyone who met him, you felt that experience from him. You felt his laughter, his joy for life. You felt that he was an eager learner. So in Aubrey, he was probably 20 years my senior, and yet he would sit there with pen and paper saying, okay, teach me, teach me, teach me. So it was just this avid learner. And then anyone who got to know him well, you unquestionably, or even just for a moment, his presence was felt. And I really believe that was because of the way in which he loved people and the way in which he cared for people. When he passed away, I've never had this experience when I speak, Justin, of people passing away, but for nearly 2 weeks, I could feel his presence near me for a long, long, long time. It was like no matter where I was, John, I could feel his presence near me. And the reason why it's been on my mind, Aubrey, is because I can feel his presence. It's been a very, very powerful experience knowing Jeff over my life. And I've never had that experience, Ruby, with anybody else in my life. My both mothers, I've been there when they passed away. That's a whole other story, Justin, but there's a joke about this, but it's a joke, but it's true, is that I've kind of always known when people close to me are going to have are going to pass. It's like this sixth sense that I've had in relationships. That hence is the reason why I went up to see Jeff at that time. But it taught me a great lesson, and what it moved into was doing one thing, and that is the way in which I approach my life, but specifically the way in which I approach my life with a journal. And you say, well, wait, why is that such a significant thing? And because what I've realized over my lifetime is that my journal and the stacks of journals that I have that sit inside of my safe at home, because they are, the most expensive books that I buy, and yet when I buy them, of course, they're empty. And yet I fill them up with what I consider to be some of the most important things. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about a journal. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I believe, let me just give you a handful of examples. Years ago, I'm sitting down in a conference room with kind of the whole entire leadership team, and someone asked, like, hey, where's all your spreadsheets? Where's all your forms? Where's all the forecasts? Where's everything that you would do to build this organization? And some of you may remember Rick Davidson, and he said, where is it all? And he was the former CEO of Century 21, Fortune 500 company. And he's like, hey, where's all of your, spreadsheets? Where's everything? He goes, how have you built all this? And I said, oh, and I lifted up, I had my journal with me. I lifted up my journal and I said, oh, it's in here. And Brenda Lee, he said that day, he goes, well, would you mind sharing it with anybody? Because it's in here. And I said, oh, I do all the time. Many times I take screenshots of my journal and I'll send it off to like a Gretchen, or nowadays even to a Kenzie, and say, hey, create a spreadsheet on this thing. And that's kind of what I do now. But if I need a spreadsheet, but my life has been shaped since in my early days as a young man, when I was probably 19 years old, I started really writing in my journal. But probably the single most defining moment of my journal writing, which really encapsulated the place in which and where I wanted to go, was when I started to figure out that the questions that I ask myself are almost more important than even the answers that I get. Now, that may seem like such a, trite, simple statement, but I want you to think about that. The questions that I ask myself are more important than the answers I get. And the reason that they are is because so often when I write the question down, I don't have the answer, Edwin. I don't have the answer to what I'm trying to do with my life. But in the process of asking the question, I come to understand, and all of a sudden, whether it's that reticular activator that is often talked about from Dispenza and Tony Robbins and others, it sounds really fancy, but all of a sudden, but it's simply this: you start paying attention and you start looking around and you start looking for answers. But the most impactful question I ever asked was when I was on a plane, a little 50-seater from the Bahamas, Nassau, to Miami. And it was one of the most turbulent, still this day, I was on a plane 121 times last year. Still this day, second most turbulent ride I've ever been on, next to being in Egypt when it was 130 or 25 degrees or whatever it was. And there was almost no lift, probably when everyone, literally when it landed, everyone cheered when we were in Cairo, going and seeing the pyramids. We were driving or flying down south, I guess it would be, to Luxor. And I remember that moment, and literally people cheered because it was such a violent flight. Well, this was similar. And so I was pretty nervous, but I had learned early on that when I was fearful, two things I can do. I can choose what I focus on. And number two, I can use gratitude as my ingredient to eliminate the fear. And so I chose to focus on something on that little flight that was just about an hour or so. I'm sure, I can't remember how long it was exactly, not long. But I remember focusing on one thing, and that was I wasn't really happy at the moment. And it wasn't there was anything, I was telling this to Aubrey yesterday, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on. It wasn't like I was, beating Mackenzie, but I asked this question: what type of father do I want to be? And at that moment, I started writing down on this yellow notepad. Well, of course, little drink things there, and I pick it up because I start getting a little tearful. I started really thinking, here's this 25, maybe 6-year-old, 7-year-old at the most. And I'm sitting there and I'm asking the question, what type of father do I want to be? And I started writing it out. I still have the notepad or the yellow papers. In fact, I was telling Aubrey that it's just in a box in my house somewhere. But I wrote in there what I wanted my fatherhood to look like and who I wanted to be as a dad to Mackenzie and to my children. And it opened my eyes to two things: is that one, I have the capacity to completely eliminate the fear of the moment. And number two, it made me realize that I have the power to choose to focus on whatever it is that I want to focus on. Now, those aren't new concepts. And each one of us has moments in our life where we start to have breakthroughs, especially when we're committed to going somewhere in our life, committed to being something in our life, committed to want to have our lives be different. We start all of a sudden having defining moments. For me, that was one of those defining moments. And I'm sure if I had you sit in a moment of silence, you would find defining moments. Some of them are negative even. Some of them are positive. Some of them are moments that were so tragic that they defined you, and all of a sudden you took entirely different courses in your life. They can be as simple or they can be as complicated, but they're defining and they help you shape the life that you want to live. And so my journal has become something that has been very profound to me. It's been very profound because as I look back over them over the years, and I've done this several times, there's a couple of things that have come to my conclusion. And I have to tell you, I stole these ideas, but also they've also, in some way, words, become mine. And what I've stolen is from a Jim Rohn who said, your journal, number one, is where you keep score. And I started to realize that as I look back over the years and I start looking at my journal, there's one thing that seems to be evident. We forget. And the good news is you don't remember everything. But what you do is you start to forget. And you start to forget what that journal has in it. And you start to forget that you either think things were even better than they were, or you often are thinking that they were far worse than they are. And so when I write in my journal, it's a place where I get to keep score. And when I go back and read it and I look at it and I'm reminded of the experience in the moment, it makes me realize that maybe it wasn't as great as I thought, or maybe it wasn't as good as I thought, or maybe it is just exactly what I thought, but it's where I keep score. And so for me, my journal has become a scorekeeper. The realities of my life, instead of what I can conjure up just in my head and maybe weeks or months or years later as to how good or bad things were, it's where I'm able to be truthful, to know exactly what was my state of mind, what were my beliefs, what was I thinking, what was I doing. It's where I keep score. The second thing is, I've always appreciated this statement, and this has become more true as life, even it comes at times more complicated. Maybe there's more disappointments, maybe there's more challenges, maybe there's more highs and lows, but it's this simple. It is as easy as this, is that if your life is worth living, you guys have heard this, if your life is worth living, then it's worth recording. And that may seem like a simple statement. If your life is worth living, it's worth recording. And I don't know about you, but especially during my concussion, I've been pretty open about this, but I sit there and I shake my head when I see like a Patrick Mahomes has a concussion and they go, he's clear to play. which he plays for Kansas City, those of you who don't know. But I think about it, I think, man, during those times, man, I got, borderline to full-blown like suicidal. And some of you don't know that if you didn't know that. But where I was able to kind of hide behind a lot of things because COVID was going on at the time. And so I remember saying to myself, boy, if I continue to feel like this, I wouldn't want to be here. And so it has a new meaning to me when I say, if your life is worth living, it's worth recording. And in some of my most difficult moments and most challenging moments are where I put words down and write them out. And in so many words, maybe even sell myself on a better and greater future, or maybe even just how I'm feeling, and I'm able to express myself, because if my life is worth living, it's worth recording. So if I say all that, that should probably be enough reasons to write in your journal. But that's not been the most impactful part of my journal. The most impactful journal starts with what I was talking about in the beginning, which is the questions that I ask myself. And in the midst of the questions I ask myself, I begin to shape my life in relationship to those questions. So just ask yourself, how many questions are you really asking yourself? See, what my journal has concluded me upon is that most of the answers are already inside of me. And the challenge is that we're so often looking outside of ourselves for answers, and yet so many of the answers are already there for each one of us. They're already there. They already exist within us. And the challenge is that a journal requires you to express yourself. A journal requires you to slow down. A journal requires you to get to depth with yourself, which is one of the most important relationships, if not the most important relationship, which then begins to spur relationships with, the divine, or to shape your relationships with others and your most meaningful ones. But most importantly, it begins to help you shape the relationship with yourself. So if you want to achieve more and you want to accomplish more, there was questions that started to put me down this path, and I want to write those down here in a minute. But I just want you to think about something. How impactful is your journal? And if you're not journaling, how come? All the science, all the research, all the most prolific speakers I know, from Tony Robbins to Jim Rohn to Les Brown, and to some of the greatest minds of our time, wrote in a journal. From Einstein to so many. And that, fortunately, we have some of their words. We have some of their thoughts. Think about this for a minute. What is every religious book? We can say it's divine. I get that. But so much of it is really just a personal journal. It is the writings and the teachings that at that moment were sacred and were written. And you have them because someone wrote them. Whatever you believe. So at some level, there seems to be this wisdom in writing, whether it's religious, political, social, family. It seems to be that there is this power behind your journal. And if you're not writing in it, it makes me question, how serious of a student are you to becoming more? It makes me question, how committed are you to your goals? It makes me question in relationship to your business practices. Now, again, you can call your journal whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be, a leather-bound book. I prefer that. I used to write a lot in yellow notepads. I don't like that as much, because I often find in those yellow notepads, I'm writing things to me that are highly sacred, meaning really important to me. My journal has become even a ritual, not mundane, not boring. I don't just check the box so I can say I did it. It's meaningful to me. It's a ritual to me, which means it's sacred to me. And the reason it's sacred is because it not only helps me keep score of the current and the past, but it helps me shape the vision of what the future is going to hold. And as much as you want to believe that you have it captured in your mind, I can promise you, you won't keep it there all the time. But it appears to me that when I read the book, and just as I have this week, I've gone back to look at my journal of things that I've written, or moments with coaches, or moments when I'm, sitting in a meeting, or I'm sitting in a church, or I'm sitting in a business meeting. It's my own seminar. It's my own teachings. It's my own message. It's the questions where people say, how do you know how to talk about blank? Well, because somewhere in these last 30 years of my journals, it's somewhere in there where I taught myself, or I wrote down what I knew about it, and then I researched and I'd come back and write more about it because I wanted to know answers. I wanted to have solutions. I wanted to solve problems, and my journal has become that, and it still is. So just remember how important and impactful that journal. Get into the habit of truly writing. Get in the habit of taking time to, after maybe you've meditated, after maybe you've prayed, after maybe you've thought, after you've pondered, after you've been in a meeting, take time to write. Don't be that person who says, oh, I'll get to that. I'll do that. Don't do it. And I have a digital in my phone. I have in my notes section on my iPhone. I have a digital section of what I would consider my notes. And I also have the handwritten. Just like yesterday at 7 a.m, man, it was cold, but I drove up for just a few minutes before I came in yesterday, and I drove up and I meditated, and then I wrote in my journal. I was all bundled up, I had gloves on. I was sitting next to the river. I was only like 3-4 minutes up the canyon, and I wrote. I meditated, I thought, I pondered, I prayed, and I wrote so that I can show up every day knowing what I'm supposed to do with my life. Because I'm convinced that a purposeful life is a lot better than just existing. A purposeful life, knowing the direction you want to take your life, is far more important than me just sitting here waiting for life to happen. So as you move through your life, I would just challenge each one of you. I'd encourage each one of you, invite each one of you to get serious about a journal. That if your life isn't the way you want it to be shaped today, if it isn't what you think it should be today, economically, or your health, or your relationships, get serious about outlining the future of your life. Create the plan. Because guys, for the last 15 years, Justin, May 27th will be 15 years of Everest. And I don't know, the first year I think they said we weren't going to be in business. The funny part is they say that today, even today, Aubrey. So it's, I get a kick out of listening to this nonsense. And yet I'm really clear on where this company is going. I'm not confused where it's going. I'm not in question of what my activities are for the day. I'm not wondering what I, quote, should do today. I'm not wondering who we're going to become and what's next. So just remember that if you're disconnected from your vision, if you're disconnected from your purpose, I have found my journal to be the most influential thing to get me reconnected to where I want to take my life. And the thing is that if you don't know where you're going, that's a problem. That is a big problem, because each one of you, somewhere in your life, people are following you, and they're being led by you, either by your example or your words or the things that you do, but they're being led by you. And I've always appreciated John Maxwell's statement in the 21 Irrefutable Laws, which is influence is nothing more, nothing less, or sorry, leadership is nothing more, nothing less than influence. But then the research shows that no matter who you are in your lifetime, you will influence and lead over 10,000 people in your lifetime, no matter who you are. Now, if you're really out there, you're going to lead more people. Hence, even more of the stewardship and the responsibility to become more. But the fact is that even if you don't think you're, quote, a leader, you're going to lead people no matter what. So where are you leading them? How clear are you on where you're going? And my point to you is if you don't know, Bill, you better figure that out, and you better get that dialed in. Because the problem is if you can't even lead others, that's a problem. But more importantly, it's a problem if you can't lead yourself. If you have big question marks, if you're renegotiating in your mind constantly throughout the day, if you feel uncertain, if you're distraught, if you're discouraged, if you're in wonderment and question marks of what you're supposed to do or why it's not working, I can promise you that your journal is the answer. Now, maybe you get divine intervention. Maybe you meditate and find answers within you. Maybe somehow you figured out, but man, write the things down that you learn and you come to. And understand who you are, where you're going, and live a purposeful life. Man, when people show up with purpose, and they show up at a listing appointment, or they show up with purpose and they're a buyer, they're with your buyer. People want to gravitate to people who are living a life of purpose. And if you think you're going to fake it because you can just wander through life and wander in some of the most uncertain times in the last 15 years in real estate, if you're wandering, I can promise you people aren't following. They want to feel your certainty. They want to feel that you have a purpose and a direction. And when people are unclear, misdirected, or undirected, and they have no purpose, people don't follow them. And so you have a stewardship and responsibility, not only for the people you have care for economically, but the people that you're supposed to lead in this business. And if you don't know where you're going and you aren't clear, concise, directed, then you are not leading anybody. They're almost avoiding you, or they might be nice to you, but they're not going to follow you. So where are you figuring that out? I have not yet figured out a better way to do that than to take what I do in my meditations, what I do in my thoughts, what I do in my own prayers, what I do in my life, than my journal. Now, again, whatever you define your journal as, I am a huge proponent of writing. But again, if you aren't taking the time, I can promise you, if you don't have a journal and I sit down with you, I promise you I'm going to find a very misdirected human being. Someone who's all over the place. Well, it's just who I am. No, it's who you've chosen to be. If you don't use the resources of your journal and I sit down with you, I promise you, because here's the problem. I'm so focused and driven as to where I'm going that when I sit with people who are not, it's not offensive to me. It actually is sad to me. It hurts the fact that I feel like they really don't know where they're going. And so often people show up in my office and these are the words essentially that come out. Help. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do next. What am I supposed to do? And I sit there and I think to myself, you don't know what to do. And I actually don't even think that's true, Greg. What I think is they haven't taken the time to write down what they know they're supposed to do. And because they don't want to face the music, because they don't want to get clear, and they are addicted to uncertainty in so many cases, they stay that way, but they don't need to. So just remember, you can take complete control of your life, but your journal is one of the greatest tools you will ever use to do so. And then I just want to throw up 3 or 4 questions for you, and then we'll wrap up. But John, go ahead. And any other thoughts anybody has?
You mentioned Albert Einstein, and I don't remember the exact percentages, but he said, when I have a problem I'm gonna work on, I'm gonna spend, and it's either 90 or 95% of the time, working on the question. And the rest of the time I'll work on the answer.
That's powerful. I've never heard that.
And the reason why I mention that is these people that say, help, I don't know what to do, they're wanting to spend all the time on the answer when they haven't even started the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's well said.
And I've been in that situation.
We all have.
But the questions are so powerful. If we don't take enough time to actually get the right question, we're not even going to get close to what we want.
Yeah, it's good. Reminds me, by the way, is that just the acknowledgement, right, that there is a problem so that you can find a solution or ask a better question. If you've known anybody who has had addiction in their lives, and all of us have some form or another of addiction, we just may do it differently, but I'm talking about the real harmful stuff. What's one of the most important things that someone has to do when they want to make it, how about this? If what's more important, Jennifer wanting me to make a change in my life, or me making it, or me wanting a change in my life or design?
You.
Right. Right. If it's the alcoholic, it's not the fact. I could all day long want someone to stop drinking because you can see the harm and the damage it's causing. But until they admit they want it, right? I mean, the beauty of that is profound, even though it's very, very hard and very, very difficult at times. The fact is you have to have a desire. Now, I'm of a belief, I mean, this is one of the questions, is that just a simple thing, what do you desire? The challenge is that so many people don't desire much, or they've given up. And so I would ask you, what do you desire? Now let's just assume that you've written down what you want, and you've written down why you want it, all right, which I often talk about. But the other part is this: who do you desire to be? Now, there's a question I often ask: who do I have to become to earn a certain amount of money? That is certainly one question. But I'm just curious. Have you thought about who you desire to be? Are you clear on that in the areas of your life, specifically in regards to your health, in regards to the relationships of your life, and of course the money or the economics of your life or the finances of your life? I hope so. But I'm going to bet, this is not a criticism, but it's going to sound like one, that most of you don't know. And you will say, oh no, I know. Really? Is it written down? Show me. Show me who you desire to become based on the words on a piece of paper or something you've typed out. And I would challenge you the fact that if you haven't gotten clear on that, you need to get clear. Because the problem is that you can't get anywhere where if you don't know where you're trying to go. And if you don't know where you want to go with your health, the relationships, and the money in your life, you're not going to get there. You're just wandering. You're just wandering through life. Well, I want to make a lot of money. How much money? Exactly. And then as I was talking to Aubrey yesterday, people walking in my office all saying, oh, I want 50 million, 25 million. Well, do you really know if that's what you need? Is that really what you want? Is that what you really desire? Well, yeah, that's what I want. Why? And all of a sudden you start breaking it down and people walk in, as I gave an example, if someone walked in and said, I want 25 million. By the time it was said and done, this individual could get everything they desired with 4 million. Everything that they really wanted for 4 million. So help me understand why you're focused on 25. I just want you to point out, I want to point out that if you don't know who you desire to be and come to understand who you are, that is a problem. You need to figure that out. The next question, just curious, what is the purpose of your life? Why are you here? Why? Now, over the years, I did not ask you this question yesterday, Aubrey, but I've tweaked that at times and I've said, what gives my life purpose, which then helps me understand the purpose of my life. Now think about it. If I know when I feel most purposeful, I start to figure out what's the purpose of my life because I want to do more of those things, Edwin. If I find out what makes my life feel purposeful, then I can find out my purpose. That has helped me over the years. An example I've given for who knows how many years, now he's, a grown adult and whatnot, but he's just playing ball, or actually both of them playing baseball with Ethan or Isaac and throwing and playing catch. It's the most purposeful times. It's like a ball and a mitt. Didn't take millions of dollars and my life felt purposeful. And I know many of you have those examples. So the question then is what is the purpose of your life? What is it you desire to be or to become? What do you desire just out of your life? What do you want? What do you want to buy? What do you want to do? Who do you want to help? Where do you want to travel? If you aren't clear on this, then you're wandering through your life. And you might say, oh, no, George, I know. Show me the last time you wrote it down and I'll be convinced. Because if you haven't written it down, it's just a dream. It's just a pipe dream. Pipe dream meaning you smoked something and thought it was going to happen. If you were confused by what that meant, is a pipe dream. Ruby's looking around. Who's confused? Right? But my point is that you don't have a dream. You just have a wish, a hope, which is not a strategy, as we all know. So just remember the impact of your journal. Get serious about it. I hope it will become some of those precious moments and pages of your life. I hope that when you are revealed as to what your desires are, when you quiet your mind and you feel the depth of your soul, that you start to understand what is it you desire? Who do you desire to be? What is it? Is your purpose? Why are you even walking on this planet that bounces in the middle of space? The majesty and the miracle of your existence. Like, why are you here? Why? Do you really know? Don't give me some dumb answer that you read somewhere from some scripture. And I say that like, whoa, hold on. No. What do you desire? And why are you here? And what was revealed to you? Not someone else who told you what you're supposed to think your purpose is. What is your purpose? Why are you here? Because when you know that and you show up, you say, why does this even matter? Because when you show up at a listing appointment and you're full of desire and purpose and clarity, you will get deals. Automatic. They won't be like, well, how much do you charge? They won't do all the nonsense that you think exists. Because people who show up with this, in closing, just as a reminder, who have clarity, purpose, and direction, that is who people want to follow. You have an obligation to the people you serve, to your families, to those you love, to your children, to your future children, to your spouse, your partner, your significant other, to be clear, purposeful, and directed. And when you're not, no one wants to follow you. And so then you sit there and go, oh, these rates are so high. And yet I just erased, I think what John or whoever wrote that up yesterday, there will always be divorces. There will always be deaths. There will always be job transfers. There will always be job promotions. There will always be first-time home buyers. There will always be investors. There will always be people who want to downsize. There will always be deals.
It was Russ.
Russ, okay, there will always be deals. Always. So if there's always deals, how come you don't have more? Because when you don't have more, you're misdirected, you have no purpose, and you have no clarity. And then you show up and prospect that way. You show up on appointments that way. You show up and do loans that way. You show up and we do title that way. And when we show up that way, no one wants to follow. No one. And so then we're supposed to think that why don't we have business? The answers, I can promise you, will be the ones you write in that journal. They will be there, and you'll know who you have to be, who you desire to be, what you want, what you desire, why you want it. You say, well, I did that a while ago. No, I'm talking, Brandon, every day. And if you are that person who walks through life, and even like I said, if you don't know the answer, writing the question, the answers will be revealed. You are a revelator. You do reveal things. The problem is sometimes they're so stuffed down there because people say things like, Justin, don't trust your feelings. You don't know. Someone else knows better than you, Edwin. And yet no one knows better than you about you. No one. But if you don't quiet your mind and get to depth with who you are and what you desire, what you want, who you need to become or desire to become, then all of a sudden you're just wandering through life. And then you sit there and go, I just again don't understand why the business isn't happening. It's easy. And I can promise you this. Here's a thought for you, Aubrey. I'll close on this. Jennifer, yesterday morning, I can't speak to why, but I woke up yesterday and I wasn't as clear, Greg, as I normally am. And you know what she said? Hey, are you okay? I kind of looked at her, Bob, like, what do you mean? I'm fine. And she goes, oh, okay. And then Ruby, she called me, I don't know, an hour or two later and just said, hey, I just want to make sure you're okay. I said, why do you keep asking me that? Well, you just look like you're off. I do? And the thing that was interesting is that I actually just said, I do? I'm like, is it that easy to detect? And she said, yes. Well, in the midst of that, Ed, when I had already written in my journal and I had meditated, I had written in my journal and I'd gotten clear, directed, and purposeful, Greg. And then in April, she saw me later. She goes, oh, okay, world's okay. Life is okay. Because see, if I show up and coach an Aubrey or an April and others that I've coached over the years, the fact is I show up with no clarity, no purpose, and misdirected. Who's going to follow, John? No one. You know who's gonna follow me? This is what's scary. Bob, do you know who's gonna follow me?
Yeah.
Me, because I'm there doing it. But only people who are weaker than me in their purpose, clarity, and direction. Remember that.
Right.
The only people who will follow you are the people who have less clarity, less purpose, and less direction. That's the people that follow. You'll only, like the law of the lid, right? I remember that was so profound to me when I read that in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. It was like, I'm like, oh my goodness, I will only lead people that I'm better than. Meaning in my skill sets, my leadership, my communication. And I can tell you, April, there was people I was petrified. One of them was like your mother, because they were so successful. Joan Pate, scared. Oh my goodness, to sit down with her. And I dedicated my life on who I desired to be. And today, and just be fairness, it's not that it was a competition with your mother. It was that I knew there was a moment where I could stand with your mother and lead her, because in fairness, I dedicated my life how to communicate, how to sell, and how to figure out this business to where she followed. I just want to remind you, you will only lead people that you are stronger and better than. It's not a competition. You're not trying to say, hey, look at me and how big and cool I am. No, if you want to lead and have an impact, and I desired to have an impact on people's lives for good. And well, the only way I figured out to do that is I had to have more clarity, purpose, and directions, skills, and other things so that I can lead them. And I'm telling you, if you will buy into this and you will use that journal and you will get clear, concise, directed, purposeful, if you will ask yourself these questions and more, and knowing what makes you tick and why you walk through this world we live in, you will win the game of life. Okay? John, and then let's get rolling. Any other thoughts, comments, anybody?
So I just add one word to that, and that'd be integrity.
Great.
You look at Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and Nelson Mandela. Two of those didn't have money or guns, or actually all three of them.
Yeah, they weren't forcing people to do things.
Nelson was in prison. They had all of those and integrity, and because of it, millions were willing to follow.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So I filled up my last journal, so I grabbed this one, and it was from 2019 to 20.
Oh, wow.
Now I've just added 223. I don't know why. Somewhere in the middle, I'm like, oh, I need a new journal. And I'm looking back now. I think that's the key, to look back.
Yes.
And I looked back 2020, January, and thoughts plus actions equal results. What is driving my life? Gratitude. Everything we need to know is right here. We just need to review it.
Yeah.
And remember, and I had written down all of my rentals. And I mean, I get kind of crazy, like a little spreadsheet that I need
Great.
to print. And it's like, how much am I making? How much do I owe on them? And keep revising. And my goal.
Constant course correction, right?
2019 was my goal was to have 8,000 positive cash flow. And I have doubled that.
Wow.
Because I keep
Nice.
looking, and that was my goal then. And I now have a goal of a $20,000 positive cash flow.
Yeah.
And that's where
Awesome.
I'm going.
Exactly.
20,000 help
A
in
month?
every,
A month.
20,000 positive cash flow.
And you
every
have,
month.
and now you've doubled this from 8 to 16 or so?
Yeah, it was 8, and now I've little by little, because it's on my mind, because I
Yeah.
look at it. And I usually
And when you
keep it-
started in Everest, which was basically 14 or so, 13, 14 years ago, basically, right? And how much did you have then going?
Oh gosh, probably 5,000 positive cash flow.
So
But it's hard, it's a mindset, it's like.
so basically over the last decade, you've done that
Yes.
because you stayed focused on your
So I
goal.
stay focused and I write it.
Yeah.
I write it all the time, and
That's my point.
usually I keep it in the back, so it's always right there,
Yeah.
and then I just keep changing it. I
Yeah.
just cross through it,
Yeah,
but my whole goal was to get those paid off. So any extra money I had, I put that way. I didn't go, I mean, I've had a great life. I do my trips and I have to, enjoy myself and celebrate, and I think that's really important. But my being debt free was very important
Yeah.
to me.
It's awesome.
Because I wanna create that life and leave that legacy and leave things for my kids, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so cool.
But
good.
this journal has made it happen.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, and it will continue to make even more things happen. And think about that. People will go back and look at it. There's so much more we could say, but one of the things I asked years ago, because knowing that people are going to read your journal, I said to someone, I said, hey, are you honest in your journal? And they looked at me like, what do you mean honest? I said, well, do you tell the truth in your journal? And they said, yes. And I said, for sure? And they said, yes. I said, oh, well, this is years and years ago. I just a few years ago started telling the truth. And they're like, what? I said, well, I'd always been in my mind thinking, who's going to read this? Just think about that. How honest are you? How transparent are you?
Well, you know what's so interesting about that? I
In your journal.
had to help someone clean out a house, because that's what we do sometimes. Mother was here, the mother went to a care center, daughter was another place, and she's like, hey, can you help us clean out this house? And I found this whole box of journals. It was very sacred to me.
Oh, yeah,
and
for
it wasn't
sure.
even my journals.
Yep.
And I'm like, hey, I found this. She goes, just throw them away. I'm like, I can't throw those away. I mean, I didn't read them, but I could tell they
Of
were
course.
journals. So I called the mother, and she wasn't kind of all there. It was hard. I said, hey, I'm bringing these up to you. She was up on Foothill. I'm like, I'm bringing them to you, and I have your Letterman jacket and your wedding dress. She goes, oh, I don't want any of those. I said, well, I'm not throwing them away. I'm bringing them to you, and you can throw them away. And I did.
Good for you. I love that. Good, 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 good. Okay,
It's
And-
fun.
Ruby?
I read something the other day that said if you think you're a leader and no one is following, you're just taking a walk.
Ooh, there you go. Yeah, yeah. Because that's the thing is, become the ultimate leader for your own life and for those that you have a stewardship to lead. So let's go. All right, here we go.